Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Cambridge City Council's Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Griffin, and I am the chair of this committee meeting taking place at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 4th of February, 2025. Members of the Scrutiny Committee are Councillor Gorthrop Wood.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Present.
Councillor Lee.
Chair, Councillor Lee sent apologies for lateness.
Thank you. Councillor Martinelli.
Hey,
Martinelli, sorry, excuse me. Great. Councillor Robertson.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Swift.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Thitala. Yes, and Councillor Tong.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Executive councillors who attend this meeting are the Executive Councillor for Housing, Councillor Bird.
I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. The Executive Councillor for Community Safety, Homelessness and Wellbeing, Councillor Holloway.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Please, may we welcome the tenant and leaseholder representatives. Diane Best. Present, Chair. Thank you. Harmony Birch.
Here, Chair.
Mandy Powell-Hardy. Oh, expected on Teams. So present on Teams, perhaps?
May not be.
May not be.
I think she is on.
Yes, here.
Oh, thank you. Justina Ullman Jaworska.
Apologies from Justina.
Okay, thank you. And Diana Mintz.
Here.
Great. So, agenda item number 1. Are there any apologies?
Oh.
I guess we've just heard those. Great. The officers permanently present throughout this meeting are the Director of the Director of Communities, Sam Scharf, Assistant Director of Housing and Homelessness, Samantha Shimon, and Committee Manager, Sarah Steed, and Meeting Producer, Boris Herzog. So a little bit of housekeeping. Please, could I advise members of the public that the only public entrance exit from the Guildhall for committee meetings is the P Hill entrance. This can be accessed from the rear of the council chamber, turn right, and either use the lift or the stairs to return to the ground floor, where you can then exit the building. Meeting procedure. The committee will receive an oral presentation from officers. Members of the committee will then discuss the report and vote on the recommendations. Tenant and leaseholder representatives will participate in the debates on all agenda items, but may only vote on items in Part 1 of the agenda. Part 1 of the meeting will be chaired by the tenant leaseholder representative. I will chair Part 2 of the agenda. To be respectful toward one another. To confirm the decision makers at this meeting are the executive councillors. Moving on to agenda item 2, please could committee members advise if they have any declarations of interest and identify which agenda item their declaration relates to.
Okay. It's an item on which I don't have a vote, but I declare an interest on the homelessness prevention grants because I'm involved with It Takes a City, and I'm also coordinator of the Women's Homelessness Action Group, which is kind of involved in some of this.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
I am a trustee of Cambridge Cyrenians, which is up for a homelessness grant.
Thank you. Councillor Gorthrop Wood.
I'm a trustee of the Mary Schutt Trust, which owns one house, which it rents to a needy female person. Other than that, it has no specific, doesn't affect anything really, but I feel I should make that clear.
Thank you for that. Okay, moving on swiftly to agenda item 3. These are the minutes of the 17th of September 2024 meeting. They've been submitted to this meeting for approval. Are there any comments, or can these minutes be approved? Could I see a show of hands for approval of the minutes? Those are approved. Now, we will move on to public question time. This lasts for 30 minutes. Public speaking rules provide that members of the public must send in the text of their question in advance of the meeting. Speakers will no longer read out their question, as the list of public questions has been published in advance of the meeting. The executive counselor or officer has 2 minutes to provide a response. Public speakers then have an opportunity to ask a follow-up question for up to 2 minutes, and the executive counselor or officer may respond as appropriate for up to 2 minutes. The committee manager will advise when the time periods are up. So, question number 1, Sarah McManus, would you like to introduce yourself and advise if you are speaking on the behalf of a group? Sarah, could you go to that one there?
Hi, Sarah McManus, and I'm speaking on behalf of West Coleridge Neighbours Group.
Thank you. Would the executive counselor like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your question, Sarah. Okay, question 1. In February 24, council officers knocked on every door to discuss the implications of the estate being added to the council's development programme. Individual meetings were arranged to discuss this further, and in June 24, letter of invitations to consultation events were sent. This was followed by a further door knocking and reminders about being left at the doors where no one was home. In July 24, 2 consultation events were held at Coleridge School on Thursday the 11th and Saturday the 13th. Information was also made available on the consultation website. The survey was sent to all addresses and included a broad range of questions to ensure that residents could feedback on issues that were important to them. All surveys are reviewed prior to the issue to ensure that they are both accessible and inclusive for residents. Paper copies of the survey and consultation documents were made available at our in-person consultation events, and council officers were on hand to answer any questions. To offer flexibility, the consultation events were held on a weekday afternoon and evening and on a weekend. Follow-up calls were made to residents to encourage responses. Question 2. To ensure the committee members were able to make an informed decision, the final survey report was included with the HSC papers, Appendix 2, and dated the 8th of August 24. The council is grateful for the further feedback that has been collected from residents. After the HSC decision to proceed with development in September 24, all households were sent a letter to confirm the decision and to provide guidance on the next steps. A surgery session was held at Coleridge School for residents to come and speak directly to officers on the 3rd of October 24. Dedicated council support has been available. Individual meetings have been held with residents since the decision. To date, 5 households have moved to properties of their choice, and a further 5 are in the process of moving. 21 households have registered on HomeLink system and are now able to place bids on properties. The council has not received any formal or informal complaints regarding the regeneration process, but welcomes all feedback to help our continuous improvements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah McManus, do you have any supplementary questions?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bird. The question was to ask how the council could improve on their surveying, not what has been done. But moving on to my follow-up question, on page 7 of our survey, you can see that 23 households, which is the majority of residents, say they have been happy living at Davy Road. On pages 7, 8, 11 and 12, you can read the many reasons why. It's peaceful and quiet, it's close to work, close to Ridgefield School, the flats are spacious, well built, in good condition. The location is amazing, near the station and the park, near the mosque, the green space, and it's a very nice neighbourhood. Now that their homes have been selected for redevelopment by the council, they are looking to the future. In fact, a few households have already uprooted themselves and moved on. One resident felt she had to move next door to some nightmare neighbours that she used to live next door to years ago in Arbury, just because it was available now, and she felt pressured to accept what she was offered. Other tenants are leaving to move to social housing just within the city limits, but for almost twice the rent, such as the cost of so-called affordable rents. And some households have been actively bidding on properties, but with no success, especially those looking for 3-bedroom flat or houses, which would be like for like at Davy Road. Another said on page 13, I told the council that when we move out, I'm going to be homeless because my mum and her partner are going to live together. And they said, what do you want us to do about it? The leaseholders have a tremendous challenge finding somewhere in Cambridge for what they are being offered. One leaseholder has looked at 47 places. Yes, 47. There are two offers in, and both have fallen through so far. They are against the clock so that they avoid the £8,000 for the repairs that the council say they can be let off if they move out by autumn. This leaseholder says, at first I was excited, and now I know there is nothing affordable about central Cambridge. Can the Executive Councillor for Housing tell me how the council will support Davy Road residents in the almost insurmountable task of finding somewhere affordable to live in their home city, and that's tenants as well as leaseholders? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bird, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Ben Binns to answer some of the questions, and then I'll come back afterwards, if that's okay?
Yes, thanks.
I think he's online.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me okay. If someone can just give me a thumbs up that I'm being heard.
Yes, you're heard.
Yes,
Thank
you are.
you. Regeneration is never easy when we have to move people out of their homes. The team that are involved in this process have to date moved nearly 300 people from leasehold, freeholds, and if they're tenants, into a home of their choice. And that's the key phrase that I want to reiterate, that we work with households, whether they're tenants or leaseholders, to help them move into a place where they want to move in. And I think that if you look at Fanshawe, the council have been pretty successful in that. And even though Davy has only a decision was made fairly recently, we've got 21 households on HomeLink. Now, the process of moving does take time, and in some cases it can take longer than others because of various different needs, whether it's schools, healthcare needs, or it could be a variety of different needs depending on the leasehold or tenant requirements with that. But our team are there to meet face to face, on the telephone or online, and to discuss any queries that anyone has in relation to this situation. We certainly are not looking to rush things. This is about getting the right place for the people and the right home for them.
Thank you. Gary, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Sarah, for your question. I do realise sometimes, you know, when you move to another place and the rent's higher, that people should be told that they can probably go on housing benefit. They ought to check that. But if you've got tenants that are really worried, please get them to contact me, and I don't mind helping. And if it needs coming out with you, I don't mind doing that either. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah, for your question. I would like to move on to question number 2 now. Do we have a representative from the Save Eakin Road group? Oh, it's a written statement. Okay, so we have a written statement. Can Jerry respond?
Okay.
Councillor
Chair.
Bird, respond. Thank you.
Okay, so question 1. There are currently 3 reported cases of DCM on Eakin Road Estate. In these cases, direct contact is made with the tenant and a visit is carried out to assess the extent of the DCM and to advise of the most appropriate treatment. In line with the Council's regulation policy, all households with reported DCM are given additional priority when placing bids on HomeLink. Question 2. There are currently 47 unoccupied properties on Eakin Estate. And as discussed at the liaison group meeting in December 24, the council will be placing hoardings on these properties to protect against any vandalism or unauthorised access. Question 3. The numbers provided within brackets next to each location refers to the number of damp, mould and consultation reports and not numbers of dwellings. Question 4. Submission of the planning application is anticipated for May 25, at which point local residents will be notified by the Greater Cambridge Planning Services. All details of the application, including the final design plans, will be available to view online on the public portal. It is not intended for the details of this redevelopment scheme to be presented again at the Housing Scrutiny Committee. Question 5. The consultation update letter was sent to all residents on the 18th of September 24. This confirmed that as design work is involved, the inclusion of eastern properties was considered to be essential to the design of the scheme from the delivery, design and financial viewpoint. This means that the planning application for redevelopment of 108 homes at Eakin Road will include the 6 houses on the north east. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. That now concludes the public questions time. Please, can I now invite Diana Mins, tenant and leaseholder representative, to chair part 1 of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and welcome, and a late Happy New Year to everyone. It's February, but I still haven't said it to everybody. Okay, right. The next agenda item we'll be looking at is agenda item 5, which is on page 31 of the first circulation, and it's the housing performance report. And I believe, and this is going to be introduced by, sorry, I haven't got my list here. Is it Samantha? Yeah, Sam's going to introduce, sorry, Sam Sharp is going to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. We're both Sam, so you can't go wrong.
Sorry?
We're both Sam, so you can't go
I know,
wrong.
I know one's a Samantha, and I'm really careful not to call her Sam, yeah? Yeah,
Fair
that's
enough.
confusing.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, there are a number of recommendations in the report all to consider. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we will give opportunity to ask questions clearly. This report is to bring together a wider picture of our performance across the HRA. I guess up until now in previous committees, we've spent more time purely on compliance side performance, which clearly is in there, and hopefully I'm sure we'll pick up. It brings together work across all areas of performance, and as you can see, and I'll just try and navigate you through a little bit of it because it's the first time we've brought it here. It's specifically alongside targets that we've set internally, outlines performance against the tenant satisfaction measures and benchmark data that we take from Housemark each year. So it is a blend, hopefully, to give you a richer picture of where we are. All of this has been helps us set our targets, consider our performance, and both through Housemark and through Acuity, who do the tenant satisfaction measures, we can see that our benchmarks against other local authorities, other housing providers, and we also get peer groups, so we're not comparing apples and pears. We also, just for context, we do have wider measures at an operational level. They're just not in this report. Just for information, we do also publish our tenant satisfaction measures on our website and continue to communicate performance through Open Doors. So this isn't the only space in which we talk about this. So in reading the report, it's possible to see our performance against these targets. And we've sort of set them up in three ways. One around our sort of operational efficiency, one around health and safety, which hopefully you'll be familiar with, and one around customer voice or resident feedback. And then there's some specific appendices around our rent regulation work, damp and mould, which go into more detail. So we do have other colleagues with us today who can answer very specific questions as they come through, but I just want to pick up, just because it is the first, a few highlights to bring this to life. Just firstly to say we haven't included everything, and I'm sure some of the feedback, one of the asks of committee today is to feedback any areas that you think are missing. We've had some of that conversation since the paper has been published, so we're aware that it doesn't include financial benchmarking at the moment, which we can bring forward. Also, further information on compliance, in which we do work with the regulator on, and a couple of things around first-time lets on new builds and void loss. So so you don't have to come back, that we're aware that there's a couple of gaps that we'll bring forward next time. So just in terms of some of the things to pull out of the report, I know that tenancy audits is of particular interest to this committee. What I'd say is that we have had resourcing issues for the first couple of quarters of this year. That has settled, and we are now playing, I'd say, catch up on the target around trying to deliver 10% tenancy audits each year. What I would say is that we are trying to just balance, it's not just the resource requirements of a team to do the tenancy audits. As you can pick out, for every tenancy audit, there's about 2.6 actions that come from that, and they're not sort of emails sent. They can be pretty significant, as you can see. They do raise repairs that we weren't aware about. They do raise wider service referrals to other statutory organisations, issues around subletting and enforcement. So we need to be mindful about a process that sort of puts additional pressure through our housing system. But we are playing catch up, and hopefully we'll get back up to 10%. Just around responsive repairs, we have seen a drop in Q3. However, what you'll see is that the performance of our repair service is within the tolerance of our targets, and also in around Q1, quartile 1, 2 of our peers. So though our performance is dropping, actually, it benchmarks pretty well. Around compliance reporting, I'm pleased to report strong continued compliance reporting. The team have done significant work over this year on that, and that has come forward, so I won't put too much time into that. But what I would say, and we'll bring more information back next time on this, is as part of some accelerated work around fire risk actions, I'm pleased to say that we've gone from 1,482 when we from April last year, so I'm working in calendar years, to now 58 around high-risk fire actions. So substantial work from the team to really bring them down. What I'd say, even on those 58, we haven't stopped there, clearly. They do relate to significant capital works on schemes. These have all been programmed, considered, and where there are risks, we're managing those risks on a daily basis and very actively. Around lettings performance, this is another area that I know people are keen to know a bit more. That is improving. Our lettings performance is improving significantly on the repairs side, and for targets for next year, again, we'll be looking to improve that substantially more. So that is in the right direction, but there is more work to be done. From a tenant satisfaction perspective, we are achieving a sort of median score on tenant satisfaction, specifically on overall satisfaction, and we have seen a bit of fluctuation on repairs satisfaction, which does tend to go up and down seasonally. Specifically on this and the detailed report on the tenant satisfaction measures, as you'll see in our sort of outline timetable for the year, will come through to scrutiny later in the year. But wanted to provide some assurance to the committee that we do have an action plan and offer a set of recommendations from last year's tenant satisfaction measures to really drive our satisfaction above the median. Clearly, it's not where we sort of rest on our laurels. And I've just got a couple of points on the appendices. One around disrepair, and just really a point. It's hard to get a sense of context to numbers sometimes, because they don't necessarily mean anything in comparison. So again, that's why we've got benchmarking data. And so actually our benchmarking data suggests that we are in the top quartile for disrepairs. And what that's related to is how many disrepairs we have against the number of properties that we have. So when we say we're in the top quartile, we have less disrepair claims against the total units rather than sort of a leaderboard type approach, if that makes sense. And just an update to the paper around the rent review, rent regulation work. It says that we should have heard from DWP by now, by this committee. We have been in liaison with DWP. We have still not had a response from DWP. That is about how we do refunds and their role in the refund. So that is disappointing, but we are continuing to engage with them, and we do hope to hear soon. That's a whistle-stop tour of quite a lot of information, but I'd rather leave time for questions.
Thank you, Sam. I think it's very good to see all this information put together in one report, and it certainly assists the authority and us as tenants to see what's happening, doesn't it? And to also make sure we're going to pass all the little tests that will come when the regulator of social housing decides to pay us a visit. On which point do we have any idea? Is there any timetable or indication when they might come?
No.
Okay,
we don't. Yeah, we'll probably get within weeks' notice when they choose to come.
So a bit like an Ofsted report, and I've been to one of those visit when I was at school. So it'll be a bit like that, yes? So we'll be cleaning up the notice boards and making everything look very tidy because we know they're coming in a week's time. I'm being slightly flippant here, but there is that, drive. I believe also you've mentioned somewhere in these papers that we're actually doing a sort of a mock inspection at the moment, which we've heard about, and we look forward to seeing what the results of that are. As I say, it's good to see all the bits in one report. I'm going to ask a couple of questions because it's my prerogative, because I'm in the chair. A couple of things is basically tenancy audit issues. You talk about that we have had vacancies. Can I just ask, does anyone off the top of their head know how many properties each housing officer is responsible for? Approximately, because I think it's quite important. There's a lot of properties there, and doing all the general stuff and fitting in tenancy audits is a challenge, it seems to me.
So there isn't an average number. It is sort of they're patch based, so they do take into account the geography of the city, but also within that kind of, you know, flats tend to there tends to be more contact with residents of flats than houses. So generally, it's in the region of about 1,200 to 1,300 per housing officer, but that can vary between those.
Quickly, it links to the tenant satisfaction measures and all the regulated social housing. Do you think we'll be able to display we know enough about our tenants? Because I think that is an issue that's happened elsewhere about whether we do know who's there. And do we have any, apart from tenancy audits, do you have any way that we should be asking people to update us on their circumstances, which I think is quite important, yes? Because it would be good to know when someone becomes perhaps more vulnerable and more in need of help, rather than us find out. Is there any way we can encourage people to report that so it comes up as a flag on their file? I think that's really important, especially when we're dealing with people, vulnerable people and people with, say, mobility and other health issues.
So we do, whenever people call in, our customer services team do double check sort of contact details. So we do make sure we have up-to-date contact information. I would say we probably don't have enough information about our tenants. A lot of that stems from kind of perhaps historical, when the Data Protection Act came in, we perhaps weren't using that data, so we stopped collecting it, and that's left us with a bit of a gap. As well as the tenancy audits where we absolutely do ask all of those questions, we are currently in the process of looking to procure an organisation to help us do a tenant census so that we can play catch up and get some of this information from residents sort of ahead of any tenancy audit, because with 10% a year, that, you know, that's not going to get us where we need to be quickly enough around knowing our residents and then being able to design services around those.
Thank you for that. I just thought it was right. Now that I've had my two penneth, now, Diane, I see you have your hand up. Is there any other councillors? Yes, councillor over there, and Jenny, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
And Harmony, and another one there. Oh, there's quite a few. I did have put the order down. I'll just sit down. So, Diane.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A question and a couple of comments. In 3.1 on page 32, and the last sentence on page 33, between them, they refer to further reporting. This report is extremely helpful. But my question is, can the director clarify how this reporting will be managed with the proposed governance changes?
Yeah.
Shall I go on with my other two things? Right, the other one is under the health and safety section, the council is putting tremendous effort and publicity into fire safety in blocks of flats. We've got an extremely diligent engagement, education and enforcement officer running around all over the city, trying to get the new policy implemented. And I think it would be very helpful in the health and safety section if this could be recorded in the appropriate way, how much stuff has had to be removed, etc., etc., etc. Because it is very important to keep this flagged up with the general public and the tenants. The other one is just a quick one. I also noticed on page 50, number 10, about the retrofitting of Eakin Road. I'll leave it with the director.
Thank you. In terms of sort of how we're developing our reporting and how we see that going forward, I think obviously we haven't moved or made any decisions on the governance review, but clearly there are proposals coming forward. You know, what we have done is develop some significant reporting in the organisation so that we're getting much more visibility and transparency amongst officers. First and foremost, and this is our sort of first, I wouldn't say first step, that would be wrong, but sort of developing step to bring that forward to members. If we were to move into the governance structures that are being proposed, that would, I think, be enhanced by what's being proposed, both in terms of significant focus on housing, which is a key part of our organisation, some more timely reporting, given the proposal to a cabinet model that meets more regularly, and effective scrutiny, similar to what we've got here, where you can actually do probably more work in scrutiny. You can come up with a work plan and do some deep dives and ask officers to go away. So I would say that the proposed governance model that needs to be considered by members will actually give greater opportunity for tenant reps, leaseholder reps and members to have visibility and get under the skin of some of our performance. On your point about health and safety and the work that officers do around education and enforcement in blocks of flats particularly, I'll take that away. When I talked earlier about, we in our paper, we're talking about the fact that we deliver 100% fire risk assessments, which is the regulatory standard, and we are 100% compliant. What I alluded to was like a lot more data underneath that about the progress and trajectory we're making on fire risk actions. I'm happy to sort of bring a bit more flavour to that. In terms of retrofitting of Eakin Road, I would have to go away and have a look at. I was listening to your question, so I'm going to have to go away and either look at the question and come back to you, or ask colleagues. I've got someone's put their hand up. Ben might be able to answer that for you.
Yes, hello. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was answered in the query that came up with the questions. So I think but we'll double check that there was a typo, but we'll take that away and check that.
Thank you. Okay, I had Harmony, and I know you'll have to put your hands up again. I've got some kind of order here. Harmony.
Yeah, about the rent regulation project update. I realise the major delay here is DWP and Universal Credit. So I was wondering, do we have any idea what percentage of the people awaiting refunds were on Universal Credit at the time this happened? And is there any real reason why the people who are not on Universal Credit can't have their refunds, considering the substantial delay this is now causing? And then those who are on Universal Credit wait for the DWP to do whatever it needs to do and be sorted later.
So we do know, I don't know the exact percentage, Harmony, but it is a significant number of residents who are on or who have potentially had Universal Credit in the past. So I can definitely report back the figures to Sarah to be circulated with the minutes. We're not quite ready with our processes at the moment. So we are running tests with housing benefits. So for any residents that are still on legacy benefits, such as housing benefit, we have to test the two systems working together, which we are currently doing as we speak. We are also recruiting a team we have a project manager in post, but now we are getting close to being able to make refunds. We are recruiting a team, and that job advert went live this week. And we are also creating an online form. I appreciate not everybody will be able to fill that in, but for the vast majority that can, that will be a really quick way. It will automate a lot of things in the background for us, so we're not having to do huge amounts of manual work on those refunds once we've already sort of got them ready to go. So once we are in a position, we can obviously communicate out with residents again to let them know what the process will be, and we will also have to take residents in sort of batches per week. If we send everything out at once, then we just physically won't be able to process it all, you know, when residents come back quite quickly. So there will be a process to go through, and we can certainly start that. That may impact kind of our intentions were to work with current tenants first. Obviously, if we exhaust all our current tenants not on universal credit, then we may have to start working through former tenants whilst we still liaise quite closely with the DWP.
Thank you. That's okay, Harmony, yeah? Yeah, that's useful, yeah.
Thank
In
you.
fact, just update us when you're ready to do whatever, the suggestion there, yeah? Okay, and I've got a variety of people with their hands up. I have Councillor Gardner-Smith, is it? Yeah?
Thank you, and thanks for the information here. I think it's really useful. I wanted to ask a question about Appendix C, damp condensation and mould and disrepair claims, the figures here. If I'm reading them correctly, it looks like there is a sort of substantial decrease in the number of completed claims this year compared to last year. Of course, we've not finished the year fully, so these are, I recognise that they are figures for partially for 2024-25. But it would be useful to hear a bit more about what you think is driving that, and whether you think we are likely to be on track to sort of hit the same levels of completion that we saw in 2023-4 in 2024-5. And I'd also like to ask just about the retrofitting programme, which is great to see. Are we on track to deliver on that within the timeframes that we've set ourselves? Thank you.
Can I ask Shaw? I can't quite see the screen, but I think Shaw or Peter's online, that they're probably their best place to comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, I've got that, Sam. Yeah, so excuse me. Disrepair claims, we have had significant success in the way that we've been addressing these and facing into the challenges that disrepair claims can bring. We've been successful in pulling in the right data at the right time, and then working closely with our legal teams, both in terms of educating the challenges that we're experiencing within the service side, but also leaning into them and their expertise in being able to address any challenges, whether that be through court or out of court decisions. In fact, more recently, first time ever that we've been successful in pushing a claim back based on the evidence that we could provide that the work that we were undertaking. Oh, sorry, is this disrepair or damp and mould that was being asked? My mistake.
This is damp and mould questions about completions of the damp and mould.
Sorry, my mistake. Let me just. Okay, so apologies there. So looking at 24-25, we've put extensive time and resources in the management of our DCM works, including internal processes and engagement with specialist contractors externally to support us in managing those works, and that's reflective in the numbers that we've been able to confidently drive down and address at a pace that is required to meet our tenants' key requirements. The table is clear in that we have been able to break out numbers reported, completed, and some of the challenges that the team is experiencing, in particular in gaining access to a property. But the works in progress is substantial that we can look in for 2025. Again, this is reflective to the amount of DCM inquiries that we're getting. It's important to also note that that work in progress also has a work stream in there where we are investigating whether the DCM inquiry is requiring key elements of work to be undertaken, and or its engagement with the tenant directly to see if there's works that we can do with the tenant in terms of communicating good practices in the management of DCM related challenges with any said one individual property. Does that answer your question, Councillor Gardner?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person, it's not in any particular order, the next person I had hand next to you is Councillor Gawthorpe-Ward.
Okay, well, thanks very much for this report. I had a lot of questions, which when I read the report, it did help answer, and particularly extrapolating the types of DCM issues that are being reported and that we've got. That's very useful. However, one of the problems I've got is that residents are reporting to me that they are confused by the process. Now, I know that you put things in the housing, sorry, do I mean Housing Matters? You know what, I'm just having a senior moment. The magazine that goes out that isn't Open Door.
Cambridge Matters.
Thank you, Cambridge Matters.
I'll just point out, if you're a flat dweller, you often don't get Cambridge Matters. And I raised that with my where I used to live, and I've raised it where I now live, and I haven't seen a copy of Cambridge Matters. So can we flag that up as an issue? Because not only are they confused, they're not even getting it, yeah?
And that is one of the issues that I don't think they're getting this. And so I'm getting reports from people saying, well, I don't understand why they've come and done a clean and wash and repaint. Aren't they going to have to come back and do the other works, which might be roof, gutters? Why haven't I had the survey done? So I think there's some communicating that needs to be done. You know, certainly if you've got a full survey that needs to be done, rather than just a quick visual inspection, especially if you're on a third floor maisonette, you know, that the people are rather confused when the work is probably in the pipeline. Somebody will come, it gets booked in, but it doesn't all happen at once. And you may have someone coming to do the clean and repaint and then have to come back and do it later. And people are asking me why. Now, one perhaps helps with the immediate problem, but the others are the more major repairs that need to be done. So I think it's partly about communication. The second thing, again, one for Cambridge Matters, that as I'm coming across cases where people do not understand what the housing audit is about and think it's some nefarious survey. I worry that when we have the nationally required ones that this may again raise fears, and people will put two together and make 110. So again, I think please keep communicating in whatever way you can. Website, Cambridge Matters, but I don't think, as Diana has said, that everybody is getting Cambridge Matters. I do, but I don't think my residents in flats are. And then the third thing was I was a little bit confused. This is on to Appendix D. Oh, is it D? You mention, hang on, it's not D. Let me go back. Yes, it's my page 43, Appendix B, statutory data, and Homes England affordable housing supply, question mark, other, question mark. So I'm not too clear what that is, but what I was saying before about the local authority data return and tenant satisfaction measures census, that perhaps we need to do a bit more engagement with residents about that. And then I am also a bit concerned that I have for example, a resident who has got various, well, is left with a big bill having bought a dehumidifier to manage the case of DCM. But there are actually other structural problems. So I'm worried about the amount that people, I think that in this case, you know, the housing officer, she should have been talking to the housing officer. Sorry, I am getting into something that does sound disclosive, but she, I know, will be happy for me to mention this. But a few cases where housing advice and the housing officer do need to be involved because they're people who are not able to afford very much, let's put it like that. And then the final point, and this is about the fire and safety regulations and measures. I know you're doing a lot, but I am now getting complaints from residents on bikes blocking stairways, for example, and what's going to happen and whether there's any enforcement. So it's the resource that we're putting into that. So regular updates will be helpful. So that's all my questions on this item, but thank you for the report, and it is very useful.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? So our tenants only magazine is Open Door. Cambridge Matters is the one that goes to all residents. So so I think what you're asking is for more communication with tenants.
Yes.
On what our processes are around perhaps the difference between our sort of responsive repairs, so where there are immediate issues and where things might have been put into a programme of sort of planned works, as it were. So yes, we do sort of fairly regularly, but we can definitely look at having something in our Open Door magazine, our tenants magazine, about that. I will pick up again, Diana, can you just clarify, is it Cambridge Matters that you don't get, or Open Door?
Oh, I get Open Door, fantastic service, but that's it's the Cambridge Matters, and I think to myself, well, can I have a refund? Because my council tax going towards my little item, years of refund. I could buy myself a whole new book or something. But the point is, raised, and he never seems to get resolved. Okay, you might have problems of getting in. There are ways and means of delivering these things. So the council thinks it's delivering to every single household, and I'm afraid that doesn't appear to be the case. And I think that is worth, if you're using that as a method of communicating with everyone in the city, it's not working, I think we're saying, yeah?
And just to add to that, I do know that there have been cases where there are people who are not good online, and certainly contact details. I know that the council's had trouble getting back in touch with people. It's one of these never-ending things. If we could think of more ways to communicate, and just more communication, hoping that people do read stuff. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Sean's going to come in probably on the damp, condensation and mould, and then I'll come back in on tenancy audits.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Just on the point about communicating, particularly around damp condensation and mould, the team have recently updated the council's website to provide a breakdown in timelines for each individual process for tenants. That's a new introduction. We've also just about to launch a new DCM video, which is a visual representation of individuals working towards mitigating risks associated to DCM. And it's not only about communicating with our external tenants, it's also communication with our internal stakeholders. So we're working very closely ongoing with our housing colleagues, the Citizens Advice Bureau, to address not only damp related concerns, but also safeguarding concerns that might be raised as part of that particular process. But it's also important to know that we are constantly and regularly reviewing our communication strategy and how we can enhance and grow that to meet our tenants' wants and educational requirements around the management of DCM.
Thank you. And Sam?
Thank you. So in terms of our tenancy audits and people being concerned about those, so what I would say is they cover a range of issues. So I think, you know, there is an element of us ensuring perhaps people are not subletting their properties, etc., which we do have to do as a responsible landlord, and making sure that the people who are supposed to be living in them are living in them. We pick up on lots of, you know, support issues. You know, there can be repairs that people perhaps haven't reported, and we do speak to them about why it's important to raise those repairs, even though they can seem quite minor. They can escalate quite quickly and cause sort of additional damage and cost a lot more for us to repair. So they're quite lengthy visits. They do talk through a lot of things with residents, but, you know, provided the right people are living in the properties, people shouldn't be worried about those visits. It is very much about us helping to support residents to ensure they know what they should be doing as a tenant, and they also understand the support that we can offer as a landlord. In terms of the fire safety side of things, and you mentioned people complaining about perhaps bikes in corridors. So we obviously brought, and it was sometime last year, but we brought our updated fire safety policy, and that talked very much about the fact that we absolutely do take these things seriously. We do have a team that can deal with this, and we do have a particular officer who is our education, I can't remember, there's three things, education, enforcement officer, who very much deals with these sorts of cases. He's particularly good at the education side, so we haven't actually had to do very much enforcement on people leaving things in corridors, because he does work very closely with residents. But absolutely, if anybody has any problems, we do have a generic housing officers email that people can email that into, which is housingofficers@cambridge.gov.uk.
And just add to what Samantha said, the key thing is if you see something, don't assume someone else has reported it. It's better it to be reported 2 or 3 times than not at all. And that's the issue when you've got there are things wrong with the common parts in flats, is everyone thinks someone else has done it. So just encourage everybody, and perhaps we make that a message within the open door. If you think there's an issue, report it, and we'd rather know about it several times than not know about it at all. It's really important. Okay, I've got a whole range of other people who haven't called yet. Harmony, you're on the list, but there's other people before, or is it a follow on from that?
Could I quickly ask who people would report it to if they're not online? Because there's this assumption that everyone's online and they're not. So if they phone in, who are they asking for?
So if they call our customer services number, again, just ask for a message to be put through to the housing officers, and they will ensure it gets to the right person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we've got a lot more people to invite. It's very difficult.
See, I have 2 questions. One is straightforward. How are emergency staff are being trained? What happened? On a very cold day, my heater turned off on a Saturday early morning at 5 o'clock. And I contacted the emergency team, and the response was rather shocking. This is not an emergency. I had the same feeling. Then I've been advised to go to local supermarket and buy a couple of heaters, and the temperature was -1. Let alone myself being an Indian, you can imagine how would that affect me. And my question is, luckily, because I am a counsellor, I directly contacted Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. She helped me. My question is, how our emergency team, are they not even capable of understanding what is emergency and what is not emergency? And then we deploy these people to be our emergency team. And then the next, Monday morning, I contacted the relevant officer. The officer said to me, "Oh, sorry, Baiju, it was weekend." And my response was, I believe I'm still in this planet. For me too, it was weekend. And it was extremely difficult 2-3 days for us. And nothing has happened during the weekend. And it was put back on Monday morning. Thank you, Jerry. And my question is this to the officers. Do you expect all Cambridge City Council tenants to be a councillor or a executive, a scrutiny committee member so that they can contact the relevant executive councillor on their private number? And that is totally unacceptable. And the second thing, I'm reading from page number 32, there you say this: the quality of the service is good and meeting the expectations of customers. Now, another example. We had some issue in our bathroom, and a date was given that the particular day someone will come and repair your bathroom. Fair enough. My wife took a day off because we were discussing some time ago. When they turn up, if you are not at the house, we might attract a fine because wasting their time. Now, then what happened? This gentleman knocked at the door at morning 8 o'clock, rushed to the bathroom, just look around, 2 minutes. Oh, sorry, I can't do it. He's gone. Right. Then I asked him what to do. So you have to call the council again, book it again. Fair enough. My wife lost one holiday on that day. Then they give us another day. And then I did not mention this to any of my colleagues in the council. And then what happened? I think they gave us another appointment after 29 days. 7 o'clock, someone turns up, knock at the door, went into the bathroom. Oh no, I can't do it. I can't do it today. It has to be someone else. I'm just down for one day. I can't do it. Off the way, he's gone. Then I asked him what to do. Even at that time, I did not mention any of my colleagues or councillors, even to Jerry. Then he asked me to contact the council. Yes, I did contact the repairs again. And another day was fixed after 29 days. And then what happened? On this 29th day, another gentleman turns up. He started to do the work. He said he is going to go for lunch. Then I said, how long you might take? An hour. I just wanted to go for shopping. And I went for shopping. And as I was standing in the shopping center, this guy called up. Oh no, I'm not feeling well, I'm not coming back. So this is the third day. Either I have lost my wages or my wife has lost her wages. So my question to the officers is, then I contacted Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. Jerry intervened. Now, my question is, as you or the officers brought or recommended or suggested, when we call into the house and if there was no one available, we will charge them. Now, my question is, can I charge you officers? If I can, tell me how much I can. Thank you.
That is a question I think that many people may well have asked in the past. And everyone has the right, I presume, to complain about that behaviour, whether they're a councillor or not. I certainly know if you're more articulate, you can make your way through the system. If you're less so, you're going to be put off more, especially with an emergency repairs. The need to have your heating fixed is an emergency, especially in very cold weather. Yeah, and in fact, if you haven't got any heating, I have had problems in the past. We had a gas central heating went down. I was lent heaters, so that can be done. Anyway, I'm not responding. I'm just saying that's a general observation. Now, who's going to answer the actual issues raised by the councillor?
Sorry, Chair, I thought that was a helpful response. Councillor, I'm sorry to hear your personal experience of two examples, I think, that you've given. Personally, I'm not aware unfamiliar with the case. I'm very happy to pick that up offline. In terms of emergency processes, we do have emergency processes. Clearly, they appear to have failed in that example, and yeah, I can only apologise. In terms of compensation, which I think was your second question, going through a complaints process does allow us to do that, and there are processes in place to recognise the inconvenience that clearly some of our service failure has caused you. So just in terms of that case, if I can come back directly, Chair, then very happy to. Clearly against the performance report that we're talking about, we are reporting here complaints, we're reporting here disrepair, so, you know, clearly we don't get it right every single time, and we have to acknowledge that, and that's why we're here, and why you're scrutinising the paper, so apologies.
Thank you. Do you have a supplement?
Just a comment, not a question, just a comment. I take your apology, but one thing I won't take is this. You did not know. If you did not know about this, we have serious problem. Most of our officers, I have emailed them, the relevant person, and if still officers are saying, I did not know, I don't take it. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to your correspondence with Sam Sharf and see what you can resolve out of it. Now, I've got a couple of hands. Sorry you've had to wait. Everyone's waiting a bit longer. Can I ask you to be as succinct as possible in the nicest possible way? Now, I don't know which out of the two of you had their hand up first. Well, one of you go first then. Councillor Martinelli.
Thanks, Chair. So I think, firstly, on the report, I think it is a useful way to present the data. I think I echo some of the earlier comments that it would be useful to have a bit more granularity, particularly around things like fire safety and fire actions. You know, one of the reasons we started getting these reports so regularly was after the Kingsway fires about 3 or 4 years ago, and obviously councillors will be concerned about that area in particular. So I think, aside from that, I thought this was a helpful way of presenting the data, and I think it's obviously stimulated a lot of discussion as well, which I think is really positive. I did have a few specific questions on aspects of it. So the first relates to the benchmarking and targeting and how we determine those. So I think in particular, looking at page 42, I was looking at our target for satisfaction with the most recent repair, which possibly speaks to Councillor Thaler's experience, and I'm wondering why we set the target below the bottom quartile, when clearly based on Q1 we can actually achieve quite significantly beyond that. So I was wondering about the technical details for that. The second question is about DCM, and I'm happy to either offer that now or when after the officers had a chance to respond to the first one, because that will be to Sean Cleary, I think, won't it? Do you want me to ask about DCM? I'll ask about DCM now. So I think regarding DCM, so I actually still don't really understand the answer to Councillor Gardner-Smith's question from earlier. So this is probably me not following, but we had a question which was essentially, why are we delivering so many fewer completions to DCM works this year compared to last financial cycle? The answer was, well, we're finding a lot more works, which I agree with. That's obviously the point of having a surveyor in post. I agree you're finding more works. What that doesn't explain to me, given you're saying a lot of resources being invested in this area, is why the completion has dropped off so substantially. And I think the only answer we really got was we might be doing a bit more sort of tenant education, in which case the question is, well, were we not doing the same stuff last year? What has changed in terms of delivery? That strikes me as likely to be a problem with vacant posts or resourcing or something along those lines. And I really wasn't clear I understood why that had dropped off from the previous answer. So perhaps we could go through that again, unless everyone else understood that, and I didn't. And finally, the other thing I wanted to relate to regarding DCM, and it speaks to the first point about the report, and then this is because it is in the minutes from the September Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting, and I think it's worth minuting a follow-up to, is that I did raise the question about the DCM figures themselves and their accuracy in September. And in particular, there was a great deal of discrepancy between what we were being presented at committee in September and July and previously. And I think it's worth minuting that the follow-up discussion from that with the team was that essentially we have no idea really where the figures generated from prior to last September came from, and we really don't think they were accurate at all. And I think it is a really important point to make and have minuted, which is that we as councillors can't really scrutinise anything effectively we have to trust the numbers that are presented to us. So I think it's positive that we're getting a better grip on the data now, but I would be interested to know what kind of quality assurance or audit is done to make sure that those numbers are accurate, because presumably back in July, officers would have told us that they were confident the numbers were correct as well. So those are my comments on the report. I'm sorry that wasn't as succinct as you'd most likely hoped, but I think they're all relevant points.
Okay, well, shall we take those? The first one was, I think, relation to sort of your repairs question, yes, and then there's some DCM ones. Are the officers able to reply?
Can I just ask for clarification on the page, the specific repair performance metric you were talking about?
It's 42 Appendix A Housing Services Performance Reporting. I'm looking at the second histogram down on the left-hand side. So our target, which is the orange solid line, sits below the benchmark lower quartile from Housemark, which is the red dotted line. It's quite small, but I think that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, thank you. I've got it. I'm just, sorry, I'm trying to... If I can ask Sean to come back on the DCM, and I'll just let me scroll through. He might be able to comment on the repairs as well.
So we're looking for Sean. Is he coming back? Yeah?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, on the repairs one, I'm going to have to take a view on that. On the DCM, again, I'm going to have to refer back to my Oppo managers to understand the rationale behind that. I haven't got a clear answer for you in regards to that at this time.
Can we ask that if once it's clarified that the clarification is circulated to members of the committee if it can't be done now? Otherwise it'll get, these things kind of get a bit lost, don't they, if they're not circulated? So we have a commitment to circulate it both to yourself as asking the questions and Councillor Garden-Smith as well, because you felt there's still some grey areas there, and just to all of us so we know what how the question would be answered if you had the information here with you or the answer with you here now, yeah? Thank you. And then the other one was... Well,
I've now, apologies, Councillor, I have now found it. I think when we set our targets back in April, we took a combination of things. We looked at benchmarking scores and we looked at our current satisfaction across... I mean, this one is specific. This is a transactional survey specific to when someone has had a repair rather than the tenant satisfaction scores, which are done annually and sort of, have you had a repair in the last 12 months? And if so, were you satisfied? So there are two indicators we work to. You're absolutely right. We probably set a target lower than lower quartile. But the combination of that and where we were with performance at the time was, I guess, where we said it. What we were very conscious about is this year particularly, and it's referenced in the recommendations of the report, with wider pressures, what we don't want to do is set targets that are unachievable and thus, demotivate teams. So it is a fine balance, but I totally recognise that it probably doesn't look great to set a target that is in lower quartile.
Okay, is Councillor Tom, you've got to come back quickly.
Very briefly, I mean, I think, I completely agree, and I did read that part of the recommendations. I think what makes this strange is obviously the quarter one, you've absolutely smashed it there. So it's, so that's what surprises me about it. It clearly is kind of achievable based on what I'm seeing.
I completely agree. The actual structure to put these transactional surveys back in is only just come back in this year as well. So you're absolutely right, and I'd expect to see us set a much higher threshold in the coming year, now that we have proper data coming through to prove that we can achieve 90%, but clearly, it's still fluctuating, so point taken.
Councillor Tom, you have been very patient, and as I say, as succinct as you can be, please.
I'll try and be succinct. Like other councillors, my question is also about Appendix C, which relates to damp, condensation and mould. I think everyone in this room acknowledges that this is a serious issue and something that we need to address across the city. I am always really pleased to see more and more information provided every HSC, and it's good that we are trying to provide that extra detail and information, because my ambition would be we do more to preempt, cases of damp condensation and mould. And if we're going to do that, I think we need as much information as possible on how it comes about. So on page 46 and 47, we have this great breakdown of causes for damp condensation and mould. One issue with it, this table, however, is that a sizable portion of the cases, 533, are sorted into the miscellaneous category, which is a little bit disappointing, especially because so much work has been done in other areas to try and sort down the kind of sub-causes, into patterns. And I was wondering if there was any information breaking down the types of recurring issues that feature in that miscellaneous section. There may be some information somewhere that I've missed, so apologies if that is the case, but I feel that if officers have done a lot of work already looking through each individual case and trying to categorise them, it feels that information should be somewhere, and it would be really useful for councillors to know.
Thank you. And I'd follow up with that as well, because I think we've raised this before. If one type of dwelling in a road is having issues, it could well be that it happens elsewhere because it's related to the type of property and the issues. So are we just making sure we're just, and it's a difficult thing. You find a couple of houses has something. Is it worth checking the rest of them because they may not be aware? So I think that's a bit of a follow-on to in this miscellaneous other thing. And in there you've got unaffected damp cause. So that's quite significant, isn't it? It barely feels like other or miscellaneous, does it? Quite significant. Anyway, sorry about that. Yes, a response, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're constantly learning from the data that we're capturing from our DCM reports. So there's definitely room to add more data, particularly around that particular area. So I'll take that away. I'll engage with the teams, and we will scrutinise our systems more thoroughly to see how we can extract that data and present it at the next HSC.
Thank you very much. And I saw one other hand up, so Councillor Gawthorpe Wood, succinct, of course.
Very quick. On the dashboards, the resident voice dashboards, I would find it useful for each bar on the charts just to have the number of responses. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take that away for next time.
Okay, unless there's any other urgent hands bobbing up and down, can I just say, well, thanks for such a comprehensive report, but of course a comprehensive report leads to comprehensive numbers of questions. So this is, it's more detailed than we normally go into, but I'm sure we've learned a lot and we hope we get some responses. So what I have to do now is, finding the right bit of the page, is seek the recommendation that we sort of note it, and yeah, that's it, I think, isn't it? Yes. You look at recommendations 1.1, the Executive Council for Housing consider, there's 4 points there. 4 points there. Are those in favour?
It's unanimous in favour, Chair.
Thank you. And does the Executive Councillor accept the recommendation, the agreed?
I do, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we've got a biggie next coming up, haven't we? Yes. Now, do we wish to have our little break now? I know it's a bit early in, but it's possibly, is it a good time to have a break now? Because it's going to be, would the people want a little break now so we then go into the next thing that may have a lot more discussion around it? Or are you prepared to wait to the end of that, which may have you bobbing up and down for different reasons and putting your hand up? So is there any particular, do people would like a sort of 10-minute break now? Yeah? I think that might be a good idea, yes. And then gird your loins to come back and discuss the BCR. Thank you. Shall we continue, please, with a very important item? I'm not making flip. The next is the agenda item 6, which is very important. So I've got a bit of spiel. I've got an introduction to this, which is quite important. Now, agenda item 6 is the budget session report for the housing revenue account. And I think that here we just need to highlight here a new process. I'll read out what I've got here, but I may have a little comment myself to make. A new process is now being put in place, which means that no decisions on the HRA budget setting report will be made by the Executive Council for Housing at this meeting today. All recommendations are proposed to be referred to the executive meeting taking place on the 10th of February, which is next Monday, for recommending to full council, which is taking place on Monday, the 24th of February, 2025. Any amendments to the HRA BSR received will be published on the 20th February 2025 for debate and decision at full council. Okay, now, before we go any further, I'm now putting my tenant representative hat on. I'm here to help scrutinise and co-manage the housing revenue account and the issues that relate to the management of council housing. And I do say, I know why some of this has happened, because we've had issues with staffing, getting the reports out in time. But we certainly as a group wanted to express our concerns that this process will exclude us from actually being able to take any kind of decision on this. We may not wish to vote on any amendments that may be going to the full council, but we will not have the chance to do it. It's a key vote for us, but we will not have that because we're not involved in the process. And I just wanted to put that down importantly as a marker, and I have raised this elsewhere, to say we're a bit concerned about this. And I know why and how, but we do feel it was kind of sprung upon us a little. And I wonder, and it may well be that other people in this meeting who are not elected tenant and leasehold representatives may feel the same, but that's our feeling about it. And I did feel that I wanted to make that clear at the beginning. So what we're going to be having now is an introduction, then some discussions and questions, but there's no amendments allowed, and I would like to have made an amendment. That's another reason. I'll talk about that later. So we're going to go in and ask the Chief Finance Officer to introduce this item. What I've said is no reflection on you, it's just an opinion that we wanted to express. Could you please introduce the item?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your introduction. So the recommendations are many for this item, and they're set out on pages 1 to 4, no less, of the attached supplementary agenda pack. So I won't run through them individually. But as the Chair has already summarised, effectively, the decision to be made today is for the Executive Councillor to recommend the HRA budget to the Executive alongside comments from this committee for their consideration and onward recommendation to the full Budget Council meeting on the 24th of February. The main reason for the change in process this year is to reflect best practice within the local government sector, which is that all revenue and capital budgets should be approved by full council and should not be delegated to other committees. So we are now bringing the HRA process in line with the General Fund, which is the reason for the slight change in approach this year. And clearly, this committee and the tenant and leaseholder representatives do have the opportunity at this meeting to feed into that process before Executive remit their recommendations to full council. And clearly, there is also the option for any tenants or leaseholders or indeed any member of the public to submit public questions to the full council meeting on the 24th of February and to attend that meeting and to speak publicly and make comments as they see fit. So in terms, moving on to the budget itself, this is building on the medium-term financial strategy, which was published and approved by full council in October 2024. And there isn't a huge amount of change in the medium-term position. So I'm just going to focus very briefly on what the key changes are within this budget setting report as compared to what came forward in the MTFS in the autumn. So the main change is obviously now we have the government's proposed rent standard. So we had assumed at the MTFS level, at the MTFS stage, we had prudently assumed that rent increases in the future may be limited to CPI plus 0.5%, but the government is now consulting on extending the current limits of CPI plus 1% for the foreseeable future. So we have now built that assumption into this MTFS, and that means a headline rent increase for 25-26 of 2.7%, which is the September CPI figure of 1.7% plus the 1% margin. The other significant change to the assumptions that we made at the MTFS is an increase in interest rates, so in terms of the future borrowing. So we receive regular updates from the Council's Treasury Management Advisors on where they see borrowing costs going in the future. And whereas at the MTFS we were forecasting an ongoing interest rate of around about 4.1% on council borrowing, following the most recent projections from our advisors, we've now increased to 4.5%. So that does have an impact on future borrowing costs. And the third change I just wanted to reference is the changes to the right to buy rules, which government announced in the autumn budget. So the two main changes there's been a significant decrease in the maximum discount allowed on right to buy applications, and the government is also looking at and consulting on potential changes to eligibility criteria. Now, as a result of that, we did have a spike in applications, as you might expect. Similar to when the government does stamp duty holidays and things like that, there's always people wanting to get in before the deadline. So as a result, we received 114 right to buy applications in November. And for context, in an average year, we would usually see around about 20 completions. So that's a significant increase. Now, some of those, not all of those applications will proceed to completion for various reasons. But I think it's just fair to flag, we are anticipating a significant short-term loss of stock in respect of that spike. And we have modelled 60 right to buy completions in the following financial year. But then following that, we've modelled actually a decrease from the previous assumption of 25 per year down to 15 per year to reflect the lower discounts available and potentially tighter eligibility criteria. So starting with the revenue then, and the revised 10-year revenue budget is set out on page 30 of the supplementary pack. There are no significant changes to the 25-26 budget compared to what was in the MTFS. Total income has moved marginally from 58.8 million to 59.4, primarily as a result of the additional rent increase. Operating expenditure, excluding capital finance and loan interest, has decreased slightly from 37.5 to 37.2, and that largely reflects a change in our depreciation assumptions. The 10-year position shows that the HRA remains financially sustainable in the medium term and is actually showing a fairly strong revenue performance with significant revenue resources still available to fund future capital spend. You may notice in the later years of the forecast, years 8 to 10, that the balance on the HRA is projected to start to increase quite quickly. That's the result really of the adjusted rent assumptions coming through. So where we've switched from the 0.5% margin to the 1% margin, and where we no longer have the new build capital spend after about year 7 or 8, we start to see the HRA balance increase. Now, obviously, we will look at that over the summer, and we will look at how we will potentially look to repurpose some of that money towards capital spend to reduce future borrowing need. But that's just the reason for that increase. Detailed revenue bids and savings are set out in Appendix F, which is page 82 of the pack. So you will see in there forecast revenue savings of £269,000 in 25-26. The majority of those have come through from the Council's organisational-wide transformation programme and group redesign that's been going on over the last few months. And a couple of additional revenue pressures which have come through in terms of IT costs effectively for the Council's housing IT systems, and continuation of support for rough sleepers. So this isn't a new service. This is a service that the Council has been providing for a number of years using government funding. The government funding is due to stop, so the budget bid has gone in to continue to provide the current level of service that tenants are currently receiving. There is also one capital bid, which is fairly minor, which is a one-off £49,000 for replacement of Windows servers. In terms of the wider capital plan, that's set out in more detail in Appendix E on page 78. So essentially, we have taken the plan from the MTFS. We've done some rephasing where there may have been some capital slippage, and also where we're slipping capital spend into future years, there's often an inflationary impact there as well. because obviously we would expect inflation to be happening on capital spend. So if that spend is going to take place in a later year, ultimately the project is potentially going to cost us a bit more. So that reflects the changes to the capital programme since the MTFS, but nothing significant in terms of what's actually going to be delivered. The capital programme still, as it did at the MTFS, still does assume significant government grant income to deliver the council's ambitious 10-year new homes programme. And I think it's very important that we flag that without that government grant, that programme will need to be revisited. And we will need to look at alternative sources of finance or potentially looking at the timing and the scale of that programme. And finally, I would just like to draw the committee's attention to Appendix A on page 65 of the pack, which sets out the key risks, the key financial risks to the HRA over the short term, just really to draw your attention to that, because obviously it's important that you're cognizant of those in the context of the budget discussion. So that was my brief introduction. Happy, of course, to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Chair's prerogative, I'll ask my questions first. Right, I've got some questions vis-a-vis. Your explanation of why the system has changed is not an explanation that we had heard before, I don't believe. So it gives an explanation, doesn't mean say we're happy about it, but it gives an explanation of why this has been done. But I don't think that came, we were just told, we weren't told why. And I think we're quite capable of understanding why, I think. But also we want to sort of make sure that you are taking account of our need to be more directly involved in this. Anyway, thank you for that explanation. That's number one. Number two, I've got some questions about the budget savings, which I want to flag up, so they'll be in the notes to go to the next round of the meetings, and it would be about, oh yeah, we're redesigning our services. There's a large sum in here for group design structure. We've had some outline details of what's happening. I believe something further is coming out in the sort of third week in February, but there's a figure in there. That's the figure you're hoping to save from redesigning. We never got that figure when we asked for it, so that's now something that fills in the gaps in our knowledge. I don't know how much aware the elected members are of all the changes that are going to be taking place on the ground in the services, yeah? I have issues about, I'm sad, I'll put it out, I'm sad to see that they also, and I know there's a rationale for it, to remove the under-occupation incentive scheme, because we're told that it's because it can be dealt with in other means. I still think it's an important incentive scheme, and I'm sad that our original model for that, which we all thought was helpful, did get reduced down considerably, but I just think there needs to be some incentive there for people under-occupying to move to smaller properties. I know that we are short of one-bed flats and everything else like that, but I do think we need to give people the chance to move and have some help to move, because for many people under-occupying, they may want to move, but they can't afford to do so. So that was a useful thing. There's also a reduction here in the budget for domestic violence measures. I'm told, because I asked it at the pre-meeting, that this is covered elsewhere. But I think we need it's good to have an explanation of this, because it's not a very good headline to sort of say, oh, you know, increasing domestic violence everywhere and increasing awareness, and yet we're knocking, well, £15,000 off of this, which could be significant. So a bit of an explanation of that and a flagging up, I think, is important. Those are the issues. I'll come in with something else. So those are the things on the actual budget. I've got some other things that I will want to say, but it's not fair that I hog it. So who would like to ask questions on this? Yeah, could you give me some answers and then we go into the questions? Thank you. Well, I was asked this at the pre-meeting, but I still think it's good to flag it up in this meeting.
Thank you. So I'll come in on some of this. So in terms of those figures around the group redesign, and those figures have only just recently been collated. So that is why they have come into this, but we didn't have those to give out previously. In terms of the under-occupation, I know we did talk about this, and, you know, the reality is that we do have to have a balanced budget, and, you know, we have had to take a look at what we can and what we can't offer. You know, if we keep that in, we'll have to stop doing something else. So I would say there, you know, we do have to make difficult decisions at times. We have had significant sort of pressures come in around around what we do. you know, all of the things that we're trying to achieve around DCM, building new homes, retrofit, all of that does mean that we have to make some difficult decisions at times. That does also speak to the domestic abuse funding that you refer to. This was a very specific pot of money of £30,000 that sat within the housing revenue account and was specifically for what they call target hardening works within our own homes. So where a victim of domestic abuse may want to remain in their own home, we're able to do additional security works such as fencing, new doors, ring doorbells, things like that, so that would help them to feel safer remaining in their homes. The reality is that this budget every year has been underspent. So we're reducing that budget to reflect the spend that we have seen year on year. And the main reason that that budget is underspent is that, unfortunately, in most cases, residents still wouldn't feel safe to remain in their homes. So instead, they are supported to look to move to alternative accommodation. So that's the main reason that that budget is underspent and why we are proposing to reduce down to the levels of spend we have seen. What I would say is if we had a particular year where we had spent that £15,000 budget, that does not mean that we would refuse anybody those works. We have an additional budget that we use for similar works in private accommodation that sits with our homelessness team. We would be able to potentially access that fund as well. So we wouldn't leave a resident, you know, without having those works because of that budget. But as I say, it is based on current spend. And we do always support people to move, which is generally their preference.
Well, thank you. I just think it's good to explain. Right, and questions. Councillor Holloway.
Can I just briefly come in on that as well? So, yeah, I think that's the key point. Whilst the headline looks a bit alarming, it is essentially a budgetary measure, and anyone who wants and needs that support will get it. That's the key message. Also, as you referred to, Diana, clearly it's a huge issue, domestic violence and domestic abuse, and this council takes it very seriously, not just in terms of this work. There's a far wider range of work that we're doing, both in our own council housing, but also in terms of our culture across the city council with our white ribbon work. I've been out talking to people at Cambridge United, talking to people at the station, with officers who do loads of really good work to raise awareness and talk to men about their behaviour and how they can change their behaviour. But also, we have our domestic abuse conference to bring together lots of different organisations who we work with. We fund different organisations. We work a lot with the police. So we are absolutely committed to this work. It's just essentially a technical adjustment. So nobody be alarmed. We are absolutely committed to tackling domestic abuse.
I do commend the work the council does, and domestic abuse conference I went to was very good, etc. But I just think it's worth highlighting, because if I don't, someone else will ask. Yeah, okay. Who do we want next?
Councillor Martinelli.
Councillor Martinelli.
Thanks very much. I think that's very reassuring. Obviously, this is something that I would imagine most people are going to ask about. So from both the executive officers, that's very helpful. I guess I want to query on the technicality point, which is that, you know, almost one of the first bullet points in Councillor Bird's foreword to the BSR is about how the tenancy audits have identified these cases of domestic abuse, domestic violence. And we heard in the previous report that the tenancy audits are, you know, we could be doing more of them to reach our targets, and we're presumably hoping to ramp them up. Is the risk not, therefore, that as we ramp up the tenancy audits, we're going to uncover more cases of domestic violence, and therefore, from a purely budgetary point of view, we'd be anticipating to spend more than we currently are anyway on this particular area?
So I think what we have seen, I don't have sort of detailed figures, but we can probably interrogate the data around our tenancy audits. As I have stated, you know, we are, you know, that is something that we pick up on tenancy audits. That doesn't necessarily mean, you know, additional security measures, target hardening, are only effective if the perpetrator is no longer in the household. Tenancy audits pick up all ranges of domestic abuse, so we do have to be mindful of that, you know, that it doesn't necessarily solve the issue there and then. I think definitely we can look at what happens sort of going forwards, but certainly the tenancy audits to date, although we are picking up cases of domestic abuse, we do make the relevant referrals, we do provide the support that we can in those cases, but it hasn't seen an increase in cases that would require target hardening. So it's a very specific budget around those kind of security measures. But as I say, they only work if the perpetrator is no longer part of the household. And generally speaking, most victims still don't feel safe and their preference is to move.
Yeah, I have a question about the under occupation incentive. I understand the rationale behind the reduction, but for those who are under occupying, who want to move and are frequently on benefits, so they don't have the money to move, moving's expensive. You know, you have to pay for moving services, there's so much you have to pay. Are there other budgets to assist people who are under occupied, who want to move? And if there are, should we be considering making this much more widely known? Because I've talked to many people who've said, I'd love to move, but how can I afford to move?
Thank you. So you're absolutely right. So where somebody is under occupying and they are struggling with that, so for example, if they are on benefits, either housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit, and they are subject to what's sort of colloquially known as the bedroom tax, if they are actively looking to move, then we can apply for what's called a discretionary housing payment that would top their rent up until they're able to move to smaller accommodation. That discretionary housing payment can also be used to help fund removal costs as part of them moving, so that they, you know, longer term, they don't require that discretionary housing payment. So yes, there are other budgets that we can use effectively, or funds that we can use, and we do work with them. We can work with residents across the board in terms of sort of their whole holistic financial inclusion, to make sure, you know, they are claiming everything that they can claim, sort of everything really to help their financial position. And we would absolutely support their move and make sure that finances are not, you know, the removal costs and things are not a barrier to them moving into smaller accommodation.
Can I ask quickly a bit of a supplementary? Following on from that, what about those people who are under occupied? There may be older people who are the very ones who don't get pension credit or other benefits, who are on that sort of cliff edge, which we've discovered that happened when the winter fuel allowance was removed. So are there capacity to help those people who may not qualify for benefits, don't have any spare money to move? That's what you're actually asking, I think, Harmony, because we understand there is help there with under sort of discretionary housing payments and things like that. But if you're not in the benefit system, is there any support there? Is that something that you can identify, or is there something should we be looking at the under occupation scheme in a different way? That's just a thought.
So no, the discretionary housing payment fund is only for those who are already on existing benefits. So as you say, that potentially could lead to a gap. I think we don't see good use of it isn't used very often, the under occupation budget, and it has been one of our submissions as part of a balanced budget. So if we were to look again at retaining that budget, we would need to look at how we cover that elsewhere and what do we stop.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Surely. Oh, anybody's hand? Oh, Councillor Robertson.
I'd like to know the way the budget's been put together, particularly with regard to making sure that there are adequate funding of repairs and DCM in particular. So there's no big bids in view being put forward for extra funding. So can you clarify how we know that there's adequate funding being provided?
Okay.
So throughout the budget setting process, clearly we're in constant dialogue with budget holders, both revenue and capital budget holders, about what they need for their services over the forthcoming years. So the budget is very much built from the bottom up in that regard. So the capital budgets, as they effectively have been left as they were approved at the MTFS level in the autumn, as I said, aside from a small amount of rephasing, moving money from one year to another, and then associated inflationary uplifts. So essentially, the capital budgets are agreed with the budget holders, and they're obviously all happy with the submissions that have gone in.
Okay, I think Samantha said earlier something about there not always being enough money for things. How do you clarify that against the statement that we actually will have enough money? Did I misunderstand what you were saying earlier, Samantha? Sorry if I did.
It's more that we have to be, you know, we have to have a balanced budget for the housing revenue account. So, you know, we do know that in terms of, we've seen in the last 2-3 years, additional pressures like the damp condensation and mould cases, all of that has been built into the budget. So obviously what that means is we have to look at, as I've said before, we have to look at what we then can't do to make sure we fund the things that we are required to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
So Gorford Wood.
Right, just a couple of questions. So on retrofitting, in my report that's page 16, but that's the printed supplement that came out. It's really, has the government, have you, do you know if government is going to be consulting on, or can you consult with government on the council retrofit financing issues? So it's the overarching finance that's available. What is available? Can you, I mean, maybe it's something for the ruling group, but to try and push government to give more money for retrofitting. That was the first question. And then table 3, looking at the housing needs register. Advice on, for people on rebanding and bidding. There seems to be quite an awkward thing for some people. Can this be improved when the existing service constraints and financial constraints? And I'm assuming that table 3, these are people who are all, well, they will all have a local connection already living here. I assume that's correct, because that's a normal thing. And then I also wondered about universal credit applications, applicants, i.e. those who are under 66. And then, plans for using the existing right to buy money. So we've got, what is it, 5.3 million at the moment. Am I right in thinking this has to be used for shared ownership schemes? That's what I think the text says. Maybe I've misunderstood. So I wondered if you could clarify those points, please. And I'm sorry, I haven't given you the paragraph number or the page number because I've got different page numbers.
I'm just trying to find some of that. So I think I found the housing needs stuff. So I think the first question you asked was around retrofit funding.
A general question really about, you know, what's the finance looking like? You know, it's not enough. Can you get more? Do you think government will consult the local authorities on what they need?
Okay, I mean, I think this council clearly has very ambitious plans in terms of delivering new homes and retrofitting existing homes. You know, I think we've been quite clear that we can't, it's not going to be affordable for us to deliver on all of those things on our own. We are going to need external support. I think dialogue with government will continue on that basis. We are intending over the summer to carry out a more detailed review of our 30-year business plan. We refresh this every 6 months, but it has been some years since we've really kind of stood back and taken a more detailed look at what we might want to do with our capital resources in the future. So that is something that we're planning to do. And I think as part of that, we need to look very carefully at what we're assuming in terms of government grant and continuing that dialogue with the government. I'll come in as well on your question about right to buy receipts, because it may just be some clumsy wording in the report, so apologies. I think you're referencing page 26, where we say that retained right to buy receipts can now be utilised in the delivery of shared ownership homes. That's not uniquely in the delivery of shared ownership homes, so we can still use them to deliver other social housing, but it's just they can now additionally be used in the delivery of shared ownership homes, whereas previously that wasn't possible.
Okay, is that okay? Yeah?
So I think you asked about, yeah, so I think it's the table 3, isn't it? The housing needs register. And your question was that those numbers that you're seeing there, do they all have a local connection?
Well, in a sense, I mean, I know that they should do, but I know that people can bid across districts. You know, East Cambs, I think, South Cambs. So I'm wondering how many really people are living here already in the city, so they're actually bidding to move when they're already in council homes, and how many are new entrants, if you like, or new bidders who aren't in council homes already, are council homes.
Okay, we would have to go away and pull that data together, because we don't have that, you know, as part of this report. This is purely looking at the headline figures around, you know, who we've got registered, you know, and in terms of having a local connection, that isn't just for those that physically live in the city. It could be that they have a very close family member who lives here that would provide them with a local connection, or they've been working here for a significant period of time as well. So there is more than just residency already that gives people local connection to Cambridge City, but we can go away. So is it who is actually living here that you want to understand, or who has a local connection?
I think really it's who's living here, who's already in city homes. I mean, I've got quite a lot of people residents who actually need to move to a larger dwelling, and they are finding it quite difficult to understand how the bidding process works, how to get themselves rebanded. So that was my second question about, you know, with transformation, with streamlining services, can we guarantee that they get the advice that they need?
So we do have a team that can help provide that advice already. It may be that you know, they perhaps don't know who to ask. So absolutely, our housing advice team, an element of that does manage all of our HomeLink applications. On our website, I would say as well, it's worth looking, especially we've already talked about people who are under occupying. The other really good way that people can move is through a mutual exchange, where they swap properties with somebody, and that they, you know, can be a much quicker way of solving their housing need.
Apologies, it's not really a budget question, that one.
Did I see Councillor Ty? I thought I saw your hand up, yeah.
Hello. So to start, I'd like to thank officers for all of their hard work on this budget. I think it's obvious that we are working within a very difficult economic climate at the moment, and tough decisions do have to be made, and I have the utmost sort of sympathy for that position. Cambridge is a really unequal city. It's often considered to be one of the most unequal cities in the UK. And because of that, day to day, we see residents struggle with the cost of living crisis, which has become a major issue all over the country. And with this document, I think it's quite undeniable that the main thing that residents are going to take away from it is the rent increase on social rent and affordable rents by about 2.7%. And I wanted to ask if we could get some more information on what has been done to assess the impact on residents before this is, you know, while this has been put together, and also what efforts will be put to assess the impact on residents after changes are put into place. Because I think most people in Cambridge at the moment feel that they are paying more and more for fewer and fewer services. And I think, well, this will be something that they are interested in. They will be wondering what is being done to address these concerns?
Thank you. Obviously we're very mindful of the impact of any rent increase on residents, and we're very sensitive clearly to cost of living pressures that people are experiencing. There is obviously an equalities impact assessment that sits alongside this budget that considers that matter. But unfortunately, as you sort of referenced at the start, we are in a really difficult economic position. We need to recognise that rent increases are capped on an annual basis. So any decision not to increase rent or to not increase rent by as much as we are allowed in any given year will have a lasting knock-on impact on the HRA. And you can see that in Appendix C on page 73, where we've done the sensitivity analysis. So just to reduce rent increases by 1% from 26-27 onwards would require the HRA to borrow an additional £20 million on top of the existing borrowing that's already in the capital programme, and would increase interest payments over a 10-year period by £3.4 million. And clearly, in a constrained environment where we need to keep delivering quality services to tenants, that's potentially going to have a big knock-on impact on the quality of service that we can deliver. So these are never sort of easy decisions, but we do consider the impact and we do appreciate the impact. But unfortunately, we do need to balance that against the need to raise the revenue to ensure that we can continue providing the level of services that tenants expect and deserve.
Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in there because, as you know, in 2022 and 23, we only put the rent up at 5% because of what was happening. Everybody was short of money and stuff. And then 23, 24, we had to put it up to 7.7%, as you know. So this time, 25, 26, is going to help residents. I know, nobody wants anything to go up, but that's the way life is at the moment. So at 2.7% is going to be a lot easier than what last year's was. So we are thinking of our tenants as well, but also we've got to balance the books. I hope that explains everything.
Thank you. Can I ask a couple of questions? I can, I'm the chair. Well, would you like to ask your question first? And
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think I just wanted to come back to this point about the group design restructure. I just wanted to say, from my perspective, it makes it very difficult to scrutinise this budget at this meeting, because in essence, this is the largest bid by quite some way that we're looking to appraise. And to me, it's very unclear what impact it will have on frontline services or really any services. Having been through quite a few of the kind of group redesign documents, I think even having been through those, it's very difficult to parse or to understand what exactly that means in practical terms. So I think otherwise, I think the budget, these are the main changes that we're looking at, and I think when items like this are presented, I really do think there does need to be, more explanation or information about them to make the budget setting process and the scrutiny around it robust, not just for councillors, but also for residents who may be interested in the scrutiny that we do. So I just wanted to express that point, really.
thank you. I wanted to ask, in the past, when we've looked at these, and I've always said, I don't think we have enough resources dedicated to resident involvement, engagement, whatever you want to call it, because we've now got a lot more obligations upon us. And I've always been told when we need it, we can do it. Will there be the capacity to look at that within the sort of, you've got a sort of contingency funding? Because I'm concerned what's happening with, I feel it's getting, I think it's significant because we've got these obligations put upon us by the various acts, but I'm not sure we've actually got the resources here to do a lot of the things. That's what I'm feeling anyway, and that's what I think the rest of the resident reps are feeling, that we need to actually ensure that we've got adequate resources to make sure we are communicating properly with tenants and leaseholders. so that we can make sure our services are responsive. And communication is another issue as well. I think I'd like to see more about how we communicate a lot of these. Do we have a communication budget? That may sound like a luxury, but if it's just open door, I think there must be other money. There should be other money in there doing other things as well. But that's a bit of an aside. So that's one point. The other point is when I introduced this, I said, we don't often make, I would like to have brought forward an amendment or something that referenced past decisions of this committee when we said that we would not process words to the effect of housing arrears action when it was solely produced by issues about universal credit. That's when it first came in. And in the past, many years ago, when Mike Todd Jones was involved in housing, we would not pursue anything that was a result of the bedroom tax, the spare room subsidy. I wanted to add in, but I can't because I know it's an issue because I can't do an amendment, but I would like to seek a reassurance that we could extend that to the other two key issues are contributing to the cost of living crisis, i.e. the two-child benefit cap, which is significant for many of our residents, I'm sure, and also the benefit cap itself. Now, it seems to me, and I don't know if any work has been done to see the impact of the benefit. If you're in an affordable rented property, whether you are going to be more significantly impacted by the benefit cap than you are if you're in a social rented property. So I think there are some issues that we need to look into and make sure we aren't pursuing people when there are those factors, or we do give them a lot of help. And it seems to me with more people coming across over the next year or 2 or 3 or however long from the legacy benefits to universal credit, we will be having a lot more of those issues arising, especially with people with disabilities who may well have some of their entitlement reduced. So I think there's a lot of issues round there. So it's first of all asking about resident involvement resources, but secondly about how we deal with those people who are still suffering from things that we hoped would have been removed. That's the only comment with a small p, political comment I'd make. We hope that those two issues of two-child benefit cap and a benefit cap would have been taken away, but they're still there, and they do put a significant impact on lots of families.
Chair, I'll come in on the resident involvement piece and then pass over. I'd like to just make sure provide assurance that our current structures around resident involvement certainly fulfil the requirements of the regulator, and I would say have the ability with the resources to go over and above that. We have significant structures of which many in the room are part of that provide rigour and scrutiny and input from residents, and it's not just yourselves. We've continued to develop that, and we do have a resident engagement strategy soon to be reset post our sort of transformation coming up. As part of, and we aren't in the position because we haven't gone through implementation yet, but as part of the consultation around transformation, one of the plans is to, in bringing together certain teams, is to strengthen our ability to hear from residents, not just though through the resources that sort of are funded directly through the HRA, but actually we have much wider teams in the council that do work around regeneration, community development, our work in community centres, and we have more resource allocated to those parts of the city that have significant council stock. So probably for further conversation, I'm sure, but I would suggest that going forward, we will have a structure that is much stronger and much more resilient and can provide more capacity to make sure that we're listening to residents and responding to residents.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on the two reports that you referenced where we've made commitments in the past. So for the benefits of everybody, if you memory doesn't go back this far, but in 2019 we had a report and a decision statement here at HSE which was in relation to universal credit itself, And it was basically sort of saying, you know, in light of issues surrounding universal credit and payment arrangements for housing costs, approvals for eviction will not be progressed for a tenant in rent arrears, which relates solely to universal credit delays and missed payments which are beyond their control, so resident controls. Any delays that are deemed to be the result of the tenant's own delay in applying / supplying the correct information will be followed up through the usual processes. So that was one of the statements, and the other one goes right back to 2013, where we had a report on the welfare reform and the impact of the tenants, and that one said eviction will not be progressed for a tenant in rent arrears which solely relate to the under occupation reduction in housing benefit when all / any of the following criteria are met, where the tenant has applied for rehousing and is making active reasonable bids, where the tenant has applied for discretionary housing payment, or where other tenancy conditions such as antisocial behaviour have not been seriously breached. So what I would suggest is, in terms of the budget setting report, both of these elements actually relate to our rent arrears side of things and actually sit better within our rent arrears policy. So in terms of, that is one of our policies that we probably do need to review. We are slightly behind on our reviews of our policies, as we've brought other things forward that needed to be reviewed urgently, such as the fire safety policy in communal areas last year. But what I'd like to do is invite, though, for us to work with residents on issues such as those as part of our review of the rental income and arrears collection policy, because that is all about rent collection. What I would also say is actually both of those, it wouldn't be in our interest to apply for possession or eviction where tenants are, it's solely down to delays with benefits, because actually what the judge would quite rightly not give us a possession order, so it really wouldn't be in our interest. So that's absolutely something that we can look to work in, because it is best practice and part of pre-court protocols in arrears collection anyway, so we can look to work those into those policies as opposed to it sitting with the budget setting report itself.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise awareness and bring that issue up because I think we'd sort of fallen behind on some of that awareness, yeah. Are there other questions? So I've rather used my position, but that's what I'm here for. Right, anybody other questions to be asked? Comments to be made?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really just a comment about Appendix D on page 75 with reference to service charges in the general stock. Increasingly, and I think this is due to what we've heard a lot about over recent months, years at this meeting about the financial crisis, I'm getting more and more contact from leaseholders and some tenants that are paying service charges in blocks of flats, particularly with reference to building cleaning, window cleaning and grounds maintenance, about value for money and the unfortunate, in some cases, deterioration in standards, particularly at the moment with grounds maintenance. And I think in order to be accountable to the people that I represent, I really need to raise that at this meeting. Looking at the table, it doesn't seem much when you look at, building cleaning £1.86 to £3.22 a week. But when that gets multiplied over a year and you're not necessarily getting the service as to the specification or the service level agreement, people are becoming very upset about it. And obviously there's not an answer, but I do feel I need to raise it because I'm getting much more contact. Very interestingly, I never get any contact about the charges for the estate services staff. I do need to emphasise that. Everybody is very satisfied with what they pay for that team.
Thank you, Diane. Do anyone want to respond to that? Or is that, it's an observation, but it's also, you're asking that we need to look at that, yeah?
I think it's important.
Thank you. Can we make sure it is? Yes. Harmony?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this isn't just within general stock. We've got the same problem within the sheltered housing schemes. That particularly there's, when it comes to window cleaning, gardening, and sometimes cleaning, but not as often, is paying for services, particularly people on benefits who have to pay for these services. Some of these services are not paid by their benefits, so they're paying out of pocket, and they're often paying for services that are not good enough or that aren't occurring at all, and that's just unfair.
Thank you.
So just to say, if you know, if people are coming to you about that, please do forward that information on to us. We also have our complaints process that people can follow either online or Harmony. They can also telephone in and speak to customer services to raise that for them. But absolutely, you know, where we do have that, you know, cleaning is always a challenging one because we can have cleaners go around, somebody walks in, you know, when it's raining and suddenly it looks, you know, it looks quite muddy again. So, you know, cleaning is always a challenging one for us, you know, to demonstrate that it's being done. But absolutely, and Harmony, in terms of cleaning and grounds maintenance would be covered by, if people are eligible for housing benefit or universal credit housing element, that would come under that. I think it's those more alarm charges and support charges. So if people have any concerns specifically about those services, obviously please do speak to your independent living facilitators in our sheltered housing schemes.
I think it's not always clear just how high those charges can get. For example, the entirety of my rent is covered by universal credit because I'm unable to work due to health and disability, but I still have to pay £176 per month out of my pocket, and it's a lot of money to find. So therefore, you know, if I'm paying it, I want the service I'm paying for. And I guess people talking about it a lot and don't make formal complaints. So I think I'm going to be suggesting to people that they much more often make formal complaints.
Thank you. Any more questions, observations? Okay. Well, thank you very much for all that. I'm sure you've been copiously taking notes, haven't you, Sarah, to forward to the executive meeting next week, yes? Okay, and I'm sure, Jerry, you'll be there raising these issues that were appropriate. Anyway, so we've had a reservation. So, well, I'm going to put it to the formal vote, actually, now. We've got 6 recommendations there from A to I on pages 1 to 2 of agenda item 6. So I'll take them en masse because no one's asked for any other way of doing it. So can I ask those in favour of the recommendations? Well, it's a bit odd. Those who are voting for it for Jerry to then not approve but take further. I mean, it's a complicated thing to ask you to do, but just vote yes or no. Yes, that's simple, isn't it? Yes, so those in favour. I can vote.
6, Chair.
Yeah. Those against? Okay.
None against, Chair.
Are you an against? Yeah, he's against. And then do we have any abstentions? Abstentions? We'll abstain this time.
5 abstentions, Chair. Sorry, that was 1 against.
Well, that's carried and, yeah. Do you approve the recommendations or note the recommendations? Whatever you're supposed to do, Jerry, do you do that?
I do.
Thank
I
you.
know.
Thank you.
Everything. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to hand over to Councillor Griffin to chair part 2 of this meeting. So it's over to you, Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you very much for chairing part 1, which was had some substantial agenda items. So thank you very much for doing such an excellent job chairing that. So we're going to now turn to the rest of the recommendations on agenda item 6. That is recommendations J through T on pages 2 to 4. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
So that's 6 in favour, Chair.
All those against?
1 against, Chair.
And those abstaining?
2 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you. Does the Executive Councillor for Housing agree with the recommendations?
I do, Chair.
Thank you. I think we can now move on to agenda item 7, the homelessness prevention grants. Could the Housing Advice Service Manager introduce this item, please? And that is Simon Hunt, I believe, online.
It is indeed. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. So my report details the proposed award of annual homelessness prevention grants for 2025-26 to partner agencies following the application round that took place towards the end of last year. It concluded in end of September, I believe. My recommendation is to approve the award of just over £321,000 across 13 projects, and then with a small amount proposed for discretionary rate relief. The money forms part of the annual homelessness grant that we receive from central government. The recommended awards are set out in Appendix 1 of my report. A few points to draw your attention to. As always, the funding is significantly oversubscribed. The value of the applications this year totaled £669,000. So we had some difficult decisions to make, as we usually do. That said, we are recommending the award of some, if not all, of the requested funding to around 75% of the projects and to all bar 2 of the applying organisations. There were some organisations that put in applications for more than one project. Applications were assessed principally against the degree to which the proposed project would relieve or prevent homelessness. Most of the projects are well known to us, so we know what they're able to achieve. Of the projects we're not recommending to fund, one didn't meet the organisational grant qualifying criteria as a private company limited by shares. 2 of the projects we felt were perhaps a step removed from homelessness prevention. And while the projects appear worthwhile, we couldn't justify funding them when competition for funding from others was so strong. And then lastly, one of the proposed projects we felt was duplicated by another project that we did recommend the award of. The report also explains that an additional amount of £120,000 from our overall government grant allocation is set aside for award under contractual rather than grant arrangement, of which 50,000 a year is awarded to It Takes a City for their winter provision for rough sleepers at Crossways. You probably know that that's under a 3-year contract, which we're halfway through. And then secondly, we're out to procurement currently for an employment advice service for people who are homeless or recently homeless. And that again will be on a 3-year contract. Just to add, we'd previously grant funded 3 separate employment advice related projects on an annual basis. So we wanted to consolidate that work into a single contract awarded on a 3-year basis, as I mentioned. So that's the overview. As I say, the recommendations, the recommended awards are all in Appendix 1 of my report, but I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from councillors? Yes, Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at page 58 about the 321,000. And the winter provision contract, 50,000, 3-year employment advice contract, seems to be significantly more than in previous years. So I just wondered, I don't know if this is for the officer or for the executive councillor, but how is that the case? I mean, it seems to be, on the surface of it, seems to be good news. How is that the case, please? Thank you.
So the contract for the winter provision, that's an agreed amount of 50,000 over the 3 years of the contract. And then the 70,000 that we're proposing using for an employment advice contract, that's the total value of the 3 projects that we previously funded under this grant. But the total on offer to organisations across grants and contract has increased. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think Cameron, Councillor Holloway has a comment to make here.
Well, just to add that it's partly because we got a lot more money from the government this year. So there are 2 major elements that we get from the government, and the homelessness prevention grant. It's a bit confusing because obviously these are our homelessness prevention grants that we give out to other organisations, but the government gives us something called a homelessness prevention grant. And so for next year, we've got a lot more of that than we did for the previous year, about £250,000 more. Now, some of that will go on our own activities, but some of that we've been able to allocate to these projects, which is really nice to be able to do.
I think in total it's an increase of about £85,000 over what we awarded last year.
Thank you, that's clarified there. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
Oh, I'm just going to bang my little drum here. I want to welcome the grant awarded to It Takes a City, as I said, we declared a bit of an interest there, for sort of the Women's Services Coordinator for that post to continue, with or without the 2 nights a week haven. That's another project. To welcome that, because that's an initiative that I and many others have been pushing for some time, recognising the need, the extra support needs, the delicacy and the depths of trauma that women who are homeless face, and this is a great recognition of this, and I think thank you very much for agreeing that one, and we want more, but it's a good step. Thank you very much indeed. I'll thank you on behalf of the homeless women in Cambridge. They're not here today. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that feedback, Diana. I think the service at the Haven is actually increasing to 2 nights and 1 afternoon. I think from February, if I understand correctly. So we're happy to support that application.
Thank you. Councillor Thitala.
Thank you for the report. This is nothing, not a question derived from the report, but just a question for some sort of clarification. If you have an emergency application for homelessness, mental health issues involved, physical health issues is involved, how many days or how many weeks it would usually take for us to do something for the particular person who is homeless? Thank you.
Well, I think you might be asking about whether or not we have an interim duty to provide accommodation whilst the application runs its course. So, for example, not everybody who presents as homeless, although we accept they're homeless, will be provided with interim accommodation whilst we attempt to relieve their homelessness. The homelessness relief duty lasts for 56 days, but as I said, that doesn't mean we will be accommodating the applicant over the course of that duty. That they have to fall within a priority need category, so they have to have, for example, dependent children, or be vulnerable as a result of mental health issues, to use another example. But there is not necessarily a duty to provide interim accommodation whilst our assistance runs its course, as I said before.
A follow-on question.
Yes.
So are you suggesting if we have someone who is homeless, give you a classic example. Someone who is homeless is both legs were amputated and then some mental health issues. This person is sleeping on the street. Are you suggesting we as the council do not have any duty to provide them some kind of a shelter? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, what I'm saying is that we have a duty to determine their application in line with the homelessness legislation, and obviously we will treat each case on its merits. I'm just saying that not everybody who applies as homeless will be owed an interim accommodation. And if they're not owed an interim accommodation, we would nonetheless try to direct them to other options. So, for example, Jimmy's night shelter, and as has been mentioned already, we you know, the winter provision for rough sleepers is currently running. But we do not have a duty to directly provide accommodation to everybody who presents as homeless. It depends on, you know, case by case basis and you know, the circumstances in the particular case.
I'm sorry, either I'm not convincing, either I'm not able to put the question in a more, a delicate way or more comprehensive way to you, or maybe you are not understanding me. I'm going to ask you this question again. Mike, this is the third time I'm trying to get an answer to the question. If we have someone homeless, disabled, both legs were amputated, mental health issues, how many days, if that person were to make an application today, how many days it would take us to process that application and give this person a shelter? Thank you.
If we have reason, if they present today and we have reason to believe they're homeless today and in priority need, we will provide accommodation today.
Thank you. That's the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gorthrop Wood, please.
Okay, so this really is a question not necessarily about the actual grants you're giving now, which is a very useful report and very interesting. It's really, given that we're looking a lot at longer term outcomes and benefits, so short and long term outcomes, and we're looking at numbers, or more and more, I think, in the council, looking at the impact in terms of outcomes. We also, long and short term, it's about numbers, but it's also about the quality of life. So I'm wondering what impact previous years' grants have had and how you're measuring it, and the current years in the future, current grants that you're about to hand out, how they'll be measured in the future, how the impact is measured or will be measured.
So every organisation that is awarded a grant has to provide 6 monthly and annual monitoring data. So within the application, they need to set out, you know, what their outcomes are likely to be in terms of preventing and relieving homelessness, and therefore they have to report back on those measures as a condition of them being awarded the grant on as I said, a 6 monthly and annual basis. I don't have with me sort of outcomes from organisations that we've awarded grant funding to previously, but I mean, I'm happy to get that information to you if you would like to see it.
Thank you.
Happy with that, thank you.
Are there any other questions before we go to a vote? I don't see any, so I'm going to ask that we now vote on recommendations on page 57 of the agenda. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Does the Executive Councillor for Community Safety, Homelessness and Wellbeing approve the recommendation?
I do, thank you, and thank you very much, Simon and colleagues, for all your work on this, but also to all of the organisations named here who really do fantastic, really important work. So I'm very glad we're able to give these grants and, as I say, to top up quite a few of them this year. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more item on the agenda. I'm hoping that we can just head straight into it without taking a break. Is that okay? Okay, that's what we'll do. And this, could I invite the CAMS HIA manager to introduce this item?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening. I'm bringing this report forward, which is a procurement of works contractors report for the purposes of complying with the Council's procurement rules.
Sorry, Chair, I can't understand.
Can you hold on a second? We might have to deal with a technical problem. We can't really hear you. It's breaking up very badly. Is there anything we can do to fix that?
Let me just see if I can make any difference.
Take the camera.
It seems to be on your end. Is there any other microphone you can use other than the one you're using?
Just wondering if this helps at all.
Nope, that doesn't help.
I'm trying lots of options to try and help this.
Oh, that sounded much better, but the volume was very low on that.
Okay, so my apologies for that. So it's a new headset I'm still getting used to.
Much better, thank you.
Excellent, okay, thank you very much. I did say good evening, everybody. So this is a report that I'm bringing forward in order for the Council to comply with the Council's procurement regulations and also the public sector procurement regulations as well. It is a procurement of works report. And just to give you a little bit of background, CAMS Home Improvement Agency is a shared council service operating across the 3 districts of Cambridge City, South Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire. Our role is to complete and support disabled people to access disabled facilities grants predominantly, but also other grant work as defined under various pieces of legislation attached to disabilities. So the report is very much a repeat because we've reached the end of the current 4-year contract terms in October 25 and March 26. And so I'm asking the Executive Councillor for Housing to approve for us to procure and award contracts to the value of 8.3 million across 2 contracts. The first one being a bathrooms and kitchens contract valued at about 4.8 million and an equipment contract valued at 3.5 million. And if by equipment, we're referring to things like ramps, hoists, specialist lifts, and other specialist equipment that needs to be fitted in people's homes, in disabled homes. This is not for the use of council housing. There is a separate budget and that's funded through the HRA and separate processes for that. The main benefits of procuring contractors to work on our behalf is it means that we can then call off of a series of contractors who move both financially and otherwise vetted to bring about greater efficiencies in terms of a fast pathway for disabled people as they present to us and need various adaptations done in their home. We also appoint specialist contractors, those with both the technical skills and also the people skills that's needed to sometimes deal with very severely disabled children and adults. In terms of risk, that's mainly mitigated as outlined in the report. And to clarify that in City, all works are funded by the government's Disabled Facilities Grant budget as well. And generally across the 3 councils each year, we spend about 3.3 million. So I haven't included an equality impact assessment because obviously everything we do is entirely for the purposes of a diverse group of disabled people. And we also have a low positive impact with regard to environmental improvements and something we're working on with our contractors to improve further as well. So I've sort of summarised the report in a very succinct nutshell. If there's any questions.
Are there any questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you very much. So we can then go on to vote on the recommendation on page 77. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
That's unanimous in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Does the Executive Councillor for Housing approve the recommendation?
I do, Chair, and thank you, Francis. You're doing a great job for disabled people.
Thank you, Councillor Bird.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That now concludes the Housing Scrutiny Committee. meeting. Please could members leave the chamber promptly and return any used glasses and red trays out to the red trays outside committee room number 1. And that ends our live stream.